Good morning and welcome to KVEC's rendition of the Iep Guidance Document in a virtual setting. We would like to take this time to welcome you to our training. The training is going to be segmented into two distinct offerings. In the first offering, we will strongly cover the present levels of performance, and we will look at the measurable annual goals. And then later today, we'll take a real strong look at progress monitoring, and we'll also take a look at LRE. So thank you for being here, and without further ado, we'll give you the virtual Iep guidance document training by our KVEC staff.
So just quickly to run back through those norms: mute your mic, use your Zoom chat, be attentive, please sign in using the QR code. Those are all part of what we are doing when we're teaching our students how to be a good Zoomer, be a good virtual student, or be a good virtual teacher. Be responsible, find a quiet place, gather your materials in advance, make sure your device is charged, be on time, and then be respectful. Stay engaged, show positive body language, raise a virtual hand, and be a kind person. So those are all those kinds of things that we will want to share with our students and teach them how to be a good, responsible virtual student. So our Zoom tools that will make any lesson more engaging. You guys have been using the chat this morning, so you already know how to do that. One of the other things that we can do is to use the Annotate tool. So up at the top, if you'll hover near the top, you've got a button that says Annotate. And what I want you to do right now is I want you to hit that button, and then I want you to choose by enabling your mouse, and then I want you to choose Draw on your Annotate, and then I want you to circle the Annotate feature on the screen. Let's see if we can do that. I see someone's already done that. A lot of folks annotating and using the draw feature. Also, okay, now out from that feature, I want you to switch, and I want you to use the stamp feature, and I want you to use whatever stamp feature you want to use. So we're throwing some hearts up there, throwing some stars up there, throwing some check boxes, or check marks, I'm sorry, not check boxes. All right, and then if you'll notice back to the left, there's a text box. If you will switch your tool to text box, it will bring up a text box. It will give you a keyboard, and you'll be able to write some words in. Can you do that? Can you switch over to the text box? Hello, everyone. I see someone's got it. Hi, Denny. Hello, 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 hello. Yes. Owsley County High School rocks. Now, obviously, there's some features in here where you can turn on who's drawing, and you can see their name. There's a whiteboard feature that we can look at. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to clear, and then I'm going to switch to the whiteboard feature for just a second and let you just take a look at that. So I'm going to clear this, all drawings, and I'm going to, let's see, stop my share for a second, hit share, and then in your share, when you pull up your share, whatever you're wanting to share on your screen, if it's the PowerPoint that you're presenting from, you can switch to the whiteboard. It always in Zoom gives you the whiteboard option. So we're going to share that for a second. And now you can use those same annotate functions to do interactive things there. You can get answers to questions. You can have students working problems. You can do a lot of different things here on the whiteboard feature. You can put in arrows. You can put in text. You can put in stamps. You can put on the spotlight. You can erase. You can hit redo. You can hit undo. You can change the color. So there's so many different things. So why don't you try to put something up on the whiteboard there and follow along with us as best you can. I just wanted you to see that feature. And as we move through. Up at the top, I see someone in the chat says that they do not see those options on their screen. Up at the top, you have to hover toward the top and pull it up, and it'll say whiteboard up there at the top, or it will switch you to the annotate button, and you can choose either of those options. Okay, so I'm going to clear all the drawings, and I'm going to stop the share for a second, and I'm going to share again, and I'm going to go back to the main. So and then you also have reactions. You have clapping hands, and you have a thumbs up on your reactions down at the bottom of your screen in your Zoom. So those are all ways that you can make some engagement happen. Those are tools that are there for you to gather information, to see what work the students are doing. And we just wanted to go through that with you really quickly. And we really need to make up some time this morning because we spent a little bit more time, and that was my fault. So now let's just really quickly, let's use the Annotate tool and circle the fish. Let's see if we can do that real quick. Find the fish in the presentation and circle the fish. Can we use the Annotate to do that? I see someone has circled it. Someone's drawn a mustache on the fish. Everybody's doing good on that. All right, excellent. And of course I have to clear it. So you always have to go in and clear it. And if you let the mouse take you over, you have to regain control of your mouse. Sometimes you'll get lost and you can say, I can't find the mouse. You have to clear everything and then regain control of the mouse.
Denny, Paul?
Yes.
This is Heather. We have a question in the box. Somebody says they can't find that option on their screen. At the very top of your screen, there should be a view option box. If you click on the down arrow, then you will see annotated at the bottom of that box.
Some folks say annotate, some folks say annotate. Good job, Heather. Thank you. Heather, please interject. Heather's really, really good with technology, and I'm not, as you've already figured that out probably. So any of you folks on staff or anybody that has any suggestions you want to make, you know, we're in this together. So we really want to make sure that everybody gets trained up and is able to use these virtual platforms in a way that we can all benefit from them. All right. Now there are several mice hidden in this presentation. Can you use the Annotate tool and use the text box to write in mice over top of the mice? Find 2 or 3 of those and see if you can use the Annotate and use the text box this time and write the word in mice over the mice. There's several hidden in this feature. I see someone's already done that. Oh yeah, we're getting it. Excellent. And if you guys are way ahead of us and you know all about this, just bear with us and we'll get through these games here in a second. All right, so I'm gonna hit annotate and clear that. Thank you for that. And then let's move on. We have one more, and I think maybe I didn't get all of them cleared, but there is a lollipop in this presentation. I think there's only one lollipop. If somebody finds the second lollipop, please let me know, but I know there is at least one. So if you could, let's just put hearts all over that lollipop. Just put hearts all, use that stamp button in your Annotate and just put, somebody's on it already. We see the heart coming up there. And we just see hearts, 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 hearts. And we'll just cover that up. with virtual hearts. All right. Now I'm going to clear all those. Someone drew a nice heart around it. Do that, and let's move on. Okay, so it's time for us to get going on, and people are still putting the hearts, and that's fine. And I'll just clear those real quick. We're going to really start talking about IEP now, and try to get you to some interactive activities so that you don't have to sit here and listen to us all day. Certainly, we're going to talk some, and that's necessary, but we also have some things planned for you. We're going to put you in breakout rooms. We're going to allow you to work from your interactive sheets. As a matter of fact, before we do that, let's go back. Let me stop share for a second, and let me see if I can hit share screen again. And let's see. Here we go. This was the sheet that we put together. This is not the completed sheet, but one of the things I asked you to do was have the Iep guidance document available, and go ahead and print that, and then also the sample Iep, Robert. So those, you know, if you have your email with your virtual interactive sheet, just go ahead and pull that up in your browser and have that available, so you can pull that information up as we move in to these breakout sessions. Now, getting back to what we were talking about, in 2017, the Ndrf case was heard at the Supreme Court level. And it was basically a case that really talked a lot about the appropriateness of the IEP. And it really had some far-reaching implications in terms of what we're supposed to be doing in order to provide a free, appropriate public education to students with disabilities. And one of the things that we had always operated under was, from the old Raleigh case, our mantra was that, you know, for a long time in special education, we didn't have to provide a Cadillac. We had to provide a Chevrolet type of IEP. So to translate that, what that really meant was that, you know, we didn't have to go all out if we were talking about the things that we were doing in terms of the expectation for progress. The expectation was just a minimum progress, a minimum floor of opportunity. And when they heard this Ndrf case, the cases between the two, the Raleigh case and the Ndrf case, was a little bit different, but the Ndrf case was heard for a student that really was, he was autistic. He was, you know, he'd been in school from preschool age, you know, entering from Part B to Part C. He had become a preschool student with an IEP, and really they had designed that IEP way back then, and they'd kind of left that IEP in place. And they really hadn't done a whole lot to that IEP. And it got to the 4th grade, and the parents decided they were going to try out a special private school down the road, a little Christian private school. And he had some really, really outstanding behaviors. And if you know this case, you know what I'm talking about. He was one of the students that, you know, had some real difficulty communicating. He was real sensitive to lots of types of sensory information and input. And he would have, you know, these outbursts, these violent outbursts, and he would run away, and he would do all the things that we have seen if we work with students that have autism. And he really, in his placement in the public school, was not making any progress on his behavior. We're not seeing any progress, but they went and enrolled him in a private school, and that private school placement, the first thing they did was they assessed his behavior, and they did a functional behavioral assessment, and they put a new IEP in place, and they used a behavior intervention plan, and they based it all on data, and they started to see, the parents did, that the student was diminishing these negative behaviors and replacing them with positive behaviors. And so they came back to the school and they said, hey, we don't want to move our student. We want to leave him there, and we want you guys to pay for it because you're supposed to be providing this free, appropriate public education for our student. And what they found when they went to court was that initially the circuit court there said, you know what, they've provided the minimum floor of opportunity for your student here, so we really don't see a problem with what the school system has done. But then they appealed that, and then the appellate courts, they appealed it all the way to the Supreme Court level. And finally, Justice John Roberts wrote the prevailing opinion on this case, and it said, you know, hey, you guys have to be understanding that you cannot keep the same goals year after year. You can't copy and paste things into the present level. You cannot not provide a student with an ambitious education that is unique to their circumstances. You must provide them with an IEP that has present levels based on data. You have to progress monitor. You have to include the parents in the decision-making process. And so all those things came out of the Ndrf case. And the Ndrf case then has become the definitive tool that we look to say, hey, are we providing a free, appropriate public education? And it's so important. And you only have to go through an audit one time to find out that our KDE folks are serious about us providing a free, appropriate public education. They're also serious. They're serious enough to put it in the guidance document that we're not to copy and paste integrated reports into the present levels. We're not to copy and paste goals from year to year. We are not to do some of these things that would not make our IEP a living document, a document that's going to really impact change and impact behavior and impact academic performance and functional performance. So as we move through, we wanted to provide that perspective for you. Why is it? It says this document says this slide here says the IEP is not a form document. It is constructed only after the careful consideration of the child's present levels of achievement, disability, and potential for growth. And in that, we use the present levels for a baseline, and we provide we should be defining that student in a way that we can write measurable goals and that we can progress monitor and that we can also hear what the parent has to say in terms of the learning. So that's that slide in a nutshell. And there's some court cases that come out around present level. This is around present level, okay? The Kirby versus Cabell County Board of Education, which is in West Virginia. These two cases, the Ravenswood City School District in California, both had problems with present level. And the big problem with the present level were they were writing things that were just copied and pasted from the integrated report. And they were really not answering the question, what is the present level for this student, both in academics and functional performance? And so we really got to be mindful of the fact that the present level has to have baseline, and it has to have measurable statements written into the present level that's going to allow us to then write measurable goals that we can say then, we can measure and we can definitively say the student is making a little progress, making no progress, making some progress. So the IEP guidance document, if you've got that handy with you, if you'll just open that thing up, that is really the IEP Bible. That's our definitive piece of information. It's 75 pages in length. And you say, well, that's a lot of information to incorporate. And one of my prior bosses that I worked closely with, Eddie Wilder, told me, said, you know what, we're special education professionals. We have to know what's in this guidance document. And so today, as we move through this training, we're going to use the table of contents, and we're going to try to use that as the backdrop for what we're doing. And we're going to take you through a bunch of information, a bunch of slides, and a bunch of interactive activities that are going to hopefully capture the majority of what is in this guidance document. So this is the definitive piece of information that we have to guide what we're doing as practitioners in special education. If we have a caseload, we should know what's in the guidance document. We should understand that when you go on to the next slide, that on pages 2 and 3, there's a table of contents. And on that table of contents, as you see here on the screen, you'll see that there's the purpose of the guidance document, the introductions to standards-based IEPs, the fact that we talk about present level and how we do not only in academic achievement, but functional performance, how we use student data for IEP development, how we look at different forms of data from the initial eligibility, and then look at different forms of data when we get to a subsequent IEP or an annual review. And then we look at the guiding questions there, and they help us to kind of frame our information and give us some things to think about in all those particular areas. And we have the steps for writing the present levels and special factors and measurable goals, and right on down, benchmarks, methods of measurement, post-secondary transition, age majority, reporting progress, all those things that are listed there, all the way down to progress monitoring on page 66, and then the addendum 68 through 75, really gives us our definitive piece of information and gives us the how-to, and it gives us a lot of information as to what we're to be documenting in a well-developed, measurable IEP. We also have a compliance connection. You know that if you do get an audit, if your district's audited, either through a consolidated monitoring visit or through a desk audit, they're going to look at things that surround pages 15 and 16. They're going to look at items 33 and beyond. And that really centers around the IEP. They're really going to look to see if you're providing a well-written IEP, that it's measurable, if you've included the parents in that information, if you've done the things that you needed to do around transition, if you've kept your timelines. But really, they're going to look really, really hard at those present levels, and they're going to look at whether or not those goals match what you've said in the present level. And then they're going to see if you have progress monitoring data to support the fact that you've implemented those services. And so you really got to be succinct. You really got to know what you're doing when you're writing that IEP. And you really need to write that IEP in such a way that it doesn't make it hard on you to gather progress monitoring information. And now, I know just recently, in the last few days, our bosses, Dion Bates, Brenda Combs, have been in meetings with KDE. And in those meetings, those KDE folk have said that the focus for this coming school year is really going to be around present levels and getting present levels correct, because folks are not getting the correct information in those present levels. So a big part of what we're going to do this morning is we're going to focus on present levels, and we're going to focus on writing those goals based on those measurable present levels. So there is, when we do a record review document, and we go through that record review document on your IEP, we're going to put some sticky notes on those things as we move through those. And we're going to try to give you as many resources to allow you to understand what it is that goes in those present levels. And then we have a legislative base. This is all rooted in the Kentucky administrative regulations in the special education programs. There's a section that talks about present level and what's supposed to be in the present level, and what we're supposed to be doing to write appropriate present levels. And so if we talk about what we want to accomplish today, this is where we're headed: to improve outcomes for students with disabilities, first and foremost. The reason we do compliance, the reason we want to write a good IEP, the backdrop for all of that is to make sure that we're doing what's right for students with disabilities. And then to provide statewide clarity and consistency of IEP development. This training hopefully will provide some clarity and consistency, and then to provide technical support to districts. So the IEP defined, the IEP is a program, an individual education program, means a written statement for a child with a disability that is developed, reviewed, and revised in accordance with 707 KAR. So that's the definition that comes straight out of the guidance document as to what an IEP is. And we know it's much more than what's written there, and we're going to talk about a lot of those things. And Heather is raising her hand.
Yes, I was going to tell them that if they check the chat box, we have put links to those documents that you're referring to in case they have not been able to get them. So if you'll click on those links in the box, it'll pull up the documents he's referred to.
Yes, and the IEP, I'm sorry, the interactive sheet should have those in your email. The Sunday night email that I sent that had the wrong Zoom link should have the correct links to those documents. So you should be able to use that interactive document and pull up the things that we're talking about.
Also, James Barnett has his hand up.
Okay. I'll have to find him here. I think we
I'm
have
sorry,
everybody
James
muted. Thank you, Heather.
Tony Harden has also put the Classroom Google link in there as well.
Thank you. From the interactive sheet and the Google Classroom, you should, on your computer, if you're on your computer, you should be able to access the links. So I'm going to assume, is this, who did you say, what was his name, James?
Yeah, his hand went down. He may have.
Okay. All right. So let's stop share for a second. All right, so let's go to the whiteboard here for a second. I'm going to clear what's on there. Let's go on the whiteboard for a second, and let's have some folks go in there and use the text box. Some of you folks that have been doing this for a while, this should be no problem for you. And what I would like for you to do is use the text box and put one of the 5 components up on the whiteboard that are written into a present level where the box is not checked as commensurate. So could you go into the whiteboard for a second, and can you go in there and use your not the draw, but switch over to the text, use the text box. Progress monitoring data, strengths. We're starting to see some things here. Keep on going. What else? Weaknesses or needs. Needs or concerns. I start seeing that. Baseline data. Weaknesses. What the students can do. Adverse effect. Do we have all of them? Brenda, do you see them all? I think they're all there. So if we're going to recap that for a second, we'd say we're going to talk about student strengths around skills. We're going to talk about student strengths relative to themselves. We're going to talk about students' needs or deficiencies that they have in academics and functional performance. And we're going to share some, we're going to have the baseline data either coming from that initial or that subsequent IEP. We're going to have progress monitoring data that's in the subsequent IEPs, and we're going to have an adverse effect statement that cites similar grade performance in those areas. So that's a really good job. It's a really good job. I'm going to clear that now. So you can see you can get some answers from folks. Good job. We appreciate that very much. And let's stop the share. Now, let's see. All right. So as you see right here, the overview of areas to be discussed in present levels, commensurate with similar age peers, or supporting test scores. We could mark that box commensurate, right? And if we do that, you can also put information in there, but you're not responsible for all of these things. But when we're talking about academic performance, we're talking about social emotional, we're talking about general intelligence. If we're talking about those types of areas of present level, then these things are going to be, we're going to be responsible for them. So talking about present levels, and to summarize all aspects of students' present levels of performance, we see that we have to identify their strengths, we identify their needs, we identify the baseline level of functioning, we describe how a student's needs or disability affects their educational performance and access to the general curriculum, and we include current supporting test scores. So those are the 5 things that we would be looking for if we're reviewing your files, if we're talking to you about what is needed in a present level. And then when we write these present levels, when we identify these needs, there are certain ways that we're going to go about that. It's not enough just to write a statement, and we're going to look at some vague statements as opposed to some well-crafted statements here in just a second. So present level information should provide enough detail to be able to write an appropriate, ambitious, measurable annual goal that promotes progress and growth, determine what their special education services that are needed, measure student progress, and they should provide you with a clear picture of the student's current circumstances, including any academic or functional needs that affect the student. Now, academic present levels can best be described as all indicators of student performance across all academic domains. This includes reading, math, behavior. Academic achievement should be reported in relation to grade level standards from the general curriculum. Academic present levels, information should be communicated with clear, concise, jargon-free language. And like I said, we're going to work on that in just a second. Functional present levels can best be described as any non-academic area that allows a student to function independently on a day-to-day basis. Cognition, communication, motor skills, behavior, social emotional functioning, all those, we should be thinking about how well the student is able to function as well as how they're able to do academics. And so we need to be thinking dually when we look at those present levels. And if there are needs there, we need to address them. So what are the essential questions? What are the identified strengths? What are the identified student needs? What's the effect of the disability on the involvement and progress in the general curriculum? What is the baseline data telling us? And is there enough information in the present levels? So those are kind of the essential questions that we would look at. We realize that you have a picture of a house foundation here. We realize that the present levels are the foundation for any IEP that we're writing. It's a summary of information and data documenting what the student currently knows and is able to do. That's kind of a definition of present levels, but we know it's the foundation, it's the building block. Without a well-written present level, we don't have anything to go on really. It's kind of like when we write statements that are not measurable, it's like blindfolded pinning the tail on the donkey. It's unmeasurable. If it's unmeasurable, then you're going to have unmeasurable goals. You cannot write present levels and then have measurable goals. That make any sense? Let's take just a minute here. I have 10:08. We've been going since about 9:25. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and we'll talk about what's on the screen and some other things, and we'll have some activities for you to do when we get back. This sheet that I sent you, you can see right here, I sent this to you in the email. You should be able to click on that, and it should take you to the Google Classroom link where that is housed. If you're not in that Google Classroom, you'll have to press that plus button and put that code in that is down on the second part of that sheet. The class code is 6Z-CRNTF. And that will take you where you need to be in the Google Classroom, and it'll allow you to have access to all the documents that we'll be using throughout the training today.
Brent Turner has asked to put that code in the chat box, please.
Put the chat, it is in, I think it's in the chat.
Yeah, I think someone just put it in. Shannon Napier just put it in for us, Denny Paul.
I'm putting it in too.
Okay.
So use that. We just put in the chat the Google Classroom code. Get in there, and you can have access to all the documents that we'll be using. You can also use the virtual sheet that we sent you. And now we're going to get back to, hopefully, what we were talking about before we left for the break. And that is this, this particular slide is one of my favorite slides when it comes to talking about present level phrases and what we're doing with present level and how we're looking at writing present level phrases. Now, what I want you to do for a second is I want you to use your chat option or your chat feature. I want you to think about the phrases here on the left, and I want you to think about the phrases here on the right. Just consider those for a second. And I want you to formulate an answer to this question and put it in the chat. And if you could, there's a way to switch your chat. Send that to me privately. If you could send that to me privately, I want you to formulate an answer to this question. What is different? What do you notice that's different about the phrases on the right, the specific phrases, from the phrases on the left? What is very clearly different, just in a general sense? And so use the chat feature. Send it to me privately. I see that chat feature going. I've got 5, 7, 8. Good. We're going up. I want you to consider these phrases. I want you to consider the difference and formulate an answer to that question.
So where do you, I think so. So where did you,
All right, go to chat down at the bottom. Do you see that? Turn your camera off. We can see you.
I don't reckon.
Please use the mute feature on your mic. I've got 31 answers in there. We're getting there. We're getting there. 33. See a lot of good responses. To give just a minute or two more for everyone to have a chance to go into the mute, send it to me privately, go into the chat, mute your microphone.
David, you need to mute again.
Okay, so as we consider that, we see a lot of good answers, a lot of good thinking around this. A lot of talk about how it's measurable on the right, it's not measurable on the left, and that's exactly right. But the one thing I wanted you to notice that what makes it measurable? What makes it measurable, in my opinion here, is that there's numbers included in the statements. So when you're writing present levels, and you're trying to write those in measurable terms, you want to include things that you can measure, things that you can count, that you can see, that you can hear, that you can time, and that you can put a quantitative number to, that you can put something on there that can be measured. So the clear difference here is your specific phrases, your measurable phrases, have numbers. And a lot of folks had that answer, and that's really good, and I appreciate that. But you see another way where you can get answers from your students, and not everyone can see those answers. Just you can see those answers. So you can ask them to respond to you privately, and you can get the answer that you're hoping to get, devoid of other participants seeing what you're putting in there. So very good job with that. And we'll move right on. So let's just do a real quick same kind of exercise. And what I want you to do here is I want you to use the chat feature once again. I want you to send it to me privately. Joey can write his name. Is that vague or specific? Is that vague or specific? Just put it in the chat. Send it to me privately. I'll be monitoring. This one's pretty easy. Should be able to get this answer pretty easy. Joey can write his name. It needs numbers. Yes, very good. So it's vague. It is vague. Very good. All right. So now Cheryl writes her name with 90% accuracy 4 trials. Is that vague or specific? Put it in the chat to me privately. Vague or specific? Very good. It's specific. Sydney requires an average of 3 prompts for 30-minute sessions. Vague or specific? We're working on the Sydney one now. Sydney requires an average of 3 prompts for 30-minute sessions. You could probably fix that a little bit, but it still is going to be measurable, and it's going to provide you some specific information on what to measure. So if you're thinking that we don't know what she's doing, she's being prompted during 30-minute sessions to do something. So we could improve that a little bit by adding that information. But we certainly know that she needs 3 prompts anytime she's involved in a 30-minute session. So we said it was specific because of the numbers. All right, let's go right on through that. So Cheryl writes her name with 90% accuracy on 4 trials. That's specific. Sydney requires an average of 3 prompts for 30-minute sessions. Now look, Aaron does not follow directions. Is that one vague or specific? I think you're getting the idea here. So when we're writing present levels, it's very important that we put numbers with our present levels. And that really helps us to define what the student is able to do at this current time. And this information needs to be current. All right, so we're going to try something here. We're going to go look for the vague or specific statement sheet inside your Google Classroom. We're going to put you in breakout rooms. And we're going to have, we have right at 90 participants. So you're going to have to bear with us a little bit. There's going to be 4 to 5 of you in a room. We're going to create the breakout room. And then we want you to go in and get that sheet, the vague and specific statements. And there's some vague and specific statements on the left. And you're going to rewrite those vague or specific statements and make them specific and make them measurable. Okay, so we're going to put you in breakout rooms. What we want you to do is once you get inside those breakout rooms, we want you guys to talk, and we want you to come up with a leader amongst your group that is going to share with us when we come back from the breakout rooms. We'll quickly go through and we're going to give you about 2 to 3 minutes to work on the sheet, try to get the sheet done as quickly as possible, and we are going to then bring you back into main session and have you share out some of your answers. Group leaders have done a good job. I'm going to recap some of those for you, starting with Brent Hamilton. Brent said Christine will turn her assignments in with 90% accuracy on 3 of 4 trials as measured by data. Anita Spence says Stephen can follow 2-step directions 75% of the time when given visual cues. Lois answers comprehension questions on a 3rd grade reading level with 80% over 3 of 5 trials. Tracy Brashear says Lois answers comprehension questions on a 2nd grade reading level with 60% accuracy 3 of 5 trials. Christine will turn in her assignments 80% accuracy in 2 of 3 trials as measured by data. Angela Howard, Lois answers comprehension questions on a 5th grade reading level with 80% accuracy. So as you see, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but as you see us going through these sessions, these different breakout sessions, you will see that the folks are doing a really good job. Lois answers comprehension questions on a 3rd grade reading level with 80% over 3 of 5 trials. So you might add that grade level in there. Stephen can follow 2-step directions 75% of the time. We felt like that one was specific enough. Christina, we need some work on. Christine will turn in her assignments with 90% accuracy on 3 of 4 trials as measured by data. And Tasha speaks too loudly and disrupts the teacher. Tasha speaks loudly and out of turn 90% of the time on 4 of 4 trials. Tasha requires 2 prompts to refrain from interrupting the teacher during 2 20-minute instructional periods. So as you see, you're saying exactly what they're able to do. You're able to put some numbers to it. You're able to put some measurement on it, and it will allow you then to write measurable goals. So once you have those statements like that, then it's going to be really easy to jump on whatever the needs are, prioritizing those needs, take them through that funneling process, deciding what those discrete skills are in order to create that bridge that's going to take them from where they are to where they need to be. And we're always in the back of our mind, and we're always thinking about a twofold process when we're doing present level. We're wanting to bring them up to speed as far as get them as close to grade level or similar age level performance, but we're also having to give them access through some other tools and through some supplementary aids and services that are going to allow them access to the general curriculum. So you got to do 2 things, and that's a big job. But certainly this is a big step in getting your present levels correct in the way that the State Department wants them. And it's a big step in the fact that you're then going to be able to follow that with measurable goals that you're going to be able to progress monitor. So a very good job. And we really appreciate the breakout rooms and how you did that. We really need for folks just to, we've got a big group, And we really need you to do just what you did right there. Excellent job of taking control and, you know, identifying a leader. The next time we identify a leader, maybe just who has the newest car in the group or something like that. So you can figure out who the leaders are going to be, and then try to stay with us, and we'll get the most out of this that we can get out of it with such a big group. And learning how to use these interactive tools and these virtual settings is a challenge for not only the students, but it is for the teachers, and it is for me. Being completely new at this, I'm much better in the classroom, but we're finding solutions and we're working through these things. And my learning curve is very steep. I don't know about you guys, but certainly that's a good job on that. And let's just move on. So when we're looking at student performance data, and we look at where student performance data comes from on the initial IEP. If you guys, you elementary teachers, are doing a lot of referrals, we know that there are places that we need to be looking. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we realize is when we're putting information in the present level from the student performance data, that they're written just that way, with measurable numbers, things that we can measure in that data. But we're looking at classroom data. We're looking at how they're doing in the classroom. We're not just looking at the integrated report that we've gotten back from a psychologist where there's some data there. We're looking at all that data. We're looking at the screening data, and we're trying to move to a more funneled process where we're really looking at the results of those interventions. And we're looking at how they're performing in the classroom. We're listening to the grade level content specialist, which is the regular ed teacher. We're looking at the grade level performance standards, and we're trying to decide what is it that what this data is telling us, and what it is that we're really needing to focus on. Where are they really behind? What's going to make the most impact in the next year for this student? So we really need to look at, you know, if we're talking about reading comprehension, it may be fluency that may be the major impactor. It may be that we have developed a baseline around those results of those RTI interventions, and we need to pull that information into the present level, and we need to use the same tool, the same method of measurement that they're using to get that information in RTI. We need to use that same tool right on through that first IEP, and use that tool to then write the goals and put the method of measurement that goes into that goal, so that we are doing the same thing. We're comparing apples to apples. We're not using two different tools, and we're not getting bad data. So that's the first thing we do, and that's explained on page 8 of the guidance document. And then secondly, we look at annual reviews. We look at analysis of progress monitoring data. And let's see if I can go back here on this slide for a second. Okay, on this slide right here, we look at the present level and the connection to progress monitoring. And when we're talking about annual reviews, we realize that the present levels are a cycle. They come to us in a cycle. Whatever happened in the previous year, it just keeps going. And we rehash that information, and we determine, based on the progress on those goals, that's their present level. That's their baseline that we're going to reinform the present level on that annual review, where they were at the end. What was their level? Where were they actually functioning? And so it's, while we know that the IEP development process is linear, we also realize that it is cyclical, in that the progress monitoring is going to reinform the present level from year to year. So we really need to focus on that and think about where we should be on that. So for annual reviews, ARC documents the discussion of student performance data, reviews available data, including IEP progress on annual goals. Present levels are updated based on current baseline and progress data. So you should be having a blurb in your conference summary. You should be documenting in your conference summary that you've discussed each individual goal, and that you've looked at the progress that the student made on that goal, and you've determined what the baseline is. Do you still need that goal, or do you need to write a different goal? And that's the kind of information that you should be bringing in a cycle each year. That's why that IEP is a process, and it's a program that continues. It just keeps working, and we keep working toward that. We must adhere to this rule. Student performance data should not be copied and pasted from the previous IEP though. So we're looking at where they were with those goals, and then the data must be obtained during the annual IEP cycle. We don't want old data. We want current data that's within a year when we're talking about baseline. So here are your steps. This comes straight out of the guidance document. We identify the student's grade level through looking at the Kentucky academic standards or looking at the early childhood standards. And then we use student data, performance data, both academically and functionally to determine where the student is. In that process, we're going to make a decision. Are they commensurate with similar age peers? Is their performance level similar to those peers? If it is, then we can check the box. That doesn't mean we can't put information in there, but if we check the box and put information in to define that student and give a clear picture of that student, we can still be alleviated of having to put all those 5 things in that are in steps 4 and 5 here. So when we look at step 4, we realize, and this is recovering it a little bit, relative strengths, needs or concerns, baseline performance for each need or concern. And then from each need or concern and baseline performance that you enter, there should be a goal. We know that for students with mild mental disabilities, that there should be a minimum of 4 goals. There should be reading, math, written expression, and adaptive behavior. So you should, if you have students on your caseload that are MMD and with the disability category of MMD, mild mental disability, a minimum of 4 goals should be in those students' program. And then 5th, describe how the student's performance affects involvement in and progress in the general curriculum. We're going to look at these things in a little more depth as we move through. So step 1, we identify the grade level standards. We locate the grade level standards in reading, writing, math, and behavior, and make sure to include the content specialist in this determination. Let's see if I can take you to the Kentucky Academic Standards here. It'll pull it up for us. So right here on my screen, you can see what the Kentucky Academic Standards look like. And you have the reading and writing together. You have math. You have ones for social studies and science and PE and that kind of thing. But we're, as special educators, we're really going to focus on those top 3 right there, along with behavior. So we're going to focus on. But you could click into that, and it tells you grade by grade what each standard is. And so that gives you a starting point to know if the student's in the 4th grade, you know what's expected of them from a performance standpoint. And then we backward chain and find those discrete skills that we work into the goals and the present level statements. So we're back here. Now we've looked at that Kentucky standard. So we locate the grade level standards in reading, writing, math, and behavior. Be sure to include the content level specialists in this determination. That's the reason you have those conversations with your grade level specialist. That's the reason that a 3rd grade teacher is in there with a 3rd grade student, and that's a requirement by law. So that they can talk to you. They should know the standards inside out and upside down, and they should be able to tell you, this student is functioning here. These are the things that we are needing the student to do, and here are the deficiencies. That provides us not only with some information in order to write the goals and to build the bridge to close the gap, but it also informs us that that student needs specially designed instruction. And that's part of being eligible in the state of Kentucky. So we really, really need to be thinking about that and focusing on that as we're working with these new goals, and we're identifying the grade level standards in step 1. Then we use the student performance data to determine baseline instructional level. This describes the student's current performance in measurable terms. It's the starting point for the IEP instruction. And in initial IEPs, student performance data comes from a certain place, and we've already talked about that. It comes from the RTI data, really. That's where it's supposed to come from. And classroom observation, classroom data. And then some information will be gathered also from the integrated report for the initial. And then on subsequent IEPs, we're looking at progress monitoring data. So your starting point, this slide's a little off here a little bit. The starting point for IEPs, initial IEP, student performance data, and then response to intervention, and state and district and classroom assessments. And then for your subsequent IEPs, we look at the IEP progress monitoring data. And then in functional performance, we're going to think about these areas. Is the student up to speed in essential skills? Are they able to take care of themselves? Are they able to communicate? Are they able to walk down to the office without assistance? Are they able to be employed if they're of that age? Do they have employability skills? Do they have daily living skills? What is their behavior? How is it impacting? And that goes for all disability categories. We know that the expectation is in the law that if you have a student that is having behavior issues, that you have a charge to create a goal around that so that you can replace negative behaviors, unwanted behaviors with positive behaviors. And we just had a training session on that last week. So I want you to understand that. Then we're looking at mobility. Sometimes students that are vision impaired have mobility issues. Some folks that are orthopedically impaired have mobility issues. So that part of the IEP, that's the functional part of it. What is their social and emotional status telling us? What is their mental health situation? And how do we address those issues? That all goes in the student performance data, non-academic, as far as present levels are concerned. And then we know with baseline data provides the starting point for each measurable annual goal. So there must be baseline data points for every measurable annual goal on the child's IEP. So there's a thread from the present level through the goal, and that the goal is tied to those statements. So when you write your statements in the way that we just did in the breakout room session, and those activity we just did, then you can jump from that point and you can write a goal that's measurable, and it's going to extend that, and it's going to be one that you've discussed, and you feel like it's a goal that's beneficial to close that gap in that particular academic or functional area. And it's derived from locally developed or adopted assessment that align with the general education curriculum. Sometimes the goals aren't any good that we write initially. Sometimes the goals are not measurable. Sometimes the goals are not tied to the baseline. Sometimes we get an IEP handed to us from someone else where they haven't done the work. And we are saying to ourselves, what do we do? Well, then we pull the student in and we figure out what the baseline is. And there's a process for that. And so we got to have baseline in the present level. And if you don't have it in your present levels, if you don't have well-developed annual review statements that have been placed in the previous paperwork, then what I'm saying to you here is that if you do not have that included, then you need to develop the baseline around those skills. You need to pull that information. You need to see what the screening information is telling you. You need to see where the student was functioning prior, and you may have to do some assessment on your own and develop your own present level. So baseline performance examples, and here's what I want us to do. I want you to take a second. I want you to go to the private chat. I want you to send me the answers in private chat, okay? The question is IEP progress monitoring data an example of baseline performance data? Yes or no in the chat. Is a doctor's diagnosis an example of baseline performance data? Is RTI data a baseline performance data? Right on down the list. Is this one, classroom-based assessments, IQ scores, work samples, standard scores of achievement? Yes or no in the chat box. And I start to see the chat box is filling up right now as we speak. Just put on private and then tell us, put IEP progress monitoring data, yes, no, whatever it is. I can tell you it's not, some of them are yes and some of them are no. That gives you a little hint. So some of these things can be baseline and some are not baseline. And we'll come back and have a talk about that in just a second. IEP progress monitoring data. that is certainly baseline performance. That would have baseline performance in it. You would be able to derive that. A doctor's diagnosis doesn't have any data in it. So you would not, that would be a no. RTI data, you can go back to what method of measurement they're using, you can go back to what tool they're using, and you can determine a baseline from that. Classroom-based assessments, you certainly can, you could determine a baseline from that. IQ score is not an example of that. Your work samples are not an example of that. Unless you put a score with it and you do the exercise of determining what the baseline is. And then standard scores of achievement are not examples of baseline information. So going right on, step 3, commensurate with same age peers. This includes a range related to peers in similar grade and age range who are not disabled. So what we're saying here is they don't have to be, you don't have to say they're performing just like a 4th grader. It's a similar grade range. It's a similar performance range. It can be similar to that to be commensurate. Doesn't have to be exact. Does not mean they're on grade level either. And that's on page 73 of your guidance document. And you can read further on that. What I can say to you about this, and we've been through a lot of audits in the last 3 or 4 years. And what I can say, the State Department, when you check the box commensurate, it alleviates you of having to put all 5 of those required components that go in, like the academic performance, for example. But when you check commensurate, let's say you check commensurate with health, vision, and motor, it's okay to go ahead and say a statement like the student requires eyeglasses. It's okay to say that the student requires certain types of medication, that type of thing. Those kinds of information, you can put in those, but they can still be commensurate because those things are mitigating those situations. Like, for example, an ADHD student taking medication, that helps them. So that may make them commensurate on that level. So you can put some information in there. The thing you can't do is put just little bits of information and leave the box unchecked and then have the state review it or have me review it and say, well, where's the rest of the information? Because if the box is unchecked, then you're responsible for that information. And I hope that makes sense. So if you check the box as commensurate, you can still put some information in there and you're alleviated of having to put all 5 components. So the process that leads to the baseline. So we review evaluation data. We look at screener information. We look at RTI data. It's kind of putting all this, what we just talked about together here. A little bit of a funneling process. We look at screeners. We look at RTI data. We look at classroom data. We look at the integrated report. I have a typo there. It should say integrated report. When we look at all that information, we start to see areas where the student is not on a similar commensurate performance level. And we start to then funnel that process down. And let's say we know that they've got problems in reading. Well, what are the specific problems in reading? And we start to funnel that information. And we identify the needs and concerns around that information. And we then make a decision. We have a discussion in the ARC in the conference summary, and we say, you know what? Based on the information that we see, we prioritize skill deficits for targeted instruction. We look at what's expected. What are the activities? What are the goals that we set that are going to get them to grade level performance or similar performance sooner? What's going to be most important for this student? So we have to have that discussion as we identify needs and concerns. And then we identify a tool to measure the baseline data for targeted skill instruction. So the big key here, and we're going to get to this eventually, when we're looking at those verbs that we're going to measure, when we're looking at those activities and those skills that they're going to perform for us, that we can see here, count time, we're going to select a tool. We're going to select a tool to measure that baseline data and give us that baseline data. We can't change the tool though, and the tool must be embedded in the goal. It can't just be direct measures. It has to be a specific tool that we're going to be able to choose that tool that's going to measure these activities. It's going to measure that verb. And that verb that you put in that goal is going to be measurable. Step 4, we're going to describe relative strengths, strengths compared to the self. So we're going to say things that in comparison to the student's own performance, this is a strength. Lots of times I refer to the general intelligence section. We look at the IQ scores and there's a breakdown of those IQ scores. And I guarantee if you look at every student's IQ score, there's one thing that they do better. It might be communicating better. It might be using information better. It might be their processing speed. That's a relative strength in comparison to their own performance. Same thing in academics, same thing functional. Okay, so we describe their relative strengths, we describe their needs and concerns, we describe what the baseline performance for each need or concern is in step 4, and the performance level in relation to similar age peers. And that's adverse effect. And describe how the performance affects involvement and progress in the general curriculum. That's using the present levels. Those are the steps that we go through in writing the present levels. In writing adverse effect statements, progress is impeded by the disability to the extent that the educational performance is significantly and consistently below the level of similar age peers. If it's not, they probably don't need a goal for it, and they may not need special education in some instances. It must tell how the disability affects the student's involvement and progress. Caution, the use of may. The student may have an adverse effect on, or this disability may have an adverse effect on their ability to write this sentence, or it may have it. Do not use may. May can also be interpreted as may not. So the State Department tells us lots of times, be careful when you're writing present level statements and you're looking at adverse effect, do not use it may appear, it may seem, or it might happen. Be definitive. This disability has this impact and causes these things to happen, which is part of their 3rd grade curriculum. And we'll look at those, some examples as we move through. And right as on cue, we're at the examples here. So examples of adverse effect statements. We're looking at specific skill at a grade level. Linda's deficits in writing affect her ability to produce different types of written products for varied purposes, which is a requirement of the 4th grade curriculum. Now, you may be asking yourself for a second, if you want this information or you want to see how that example, how it's written, this PowerPoint will be included in the Google Classroom that you have access to and will have access to from now on. We're going to keep that up and you're going to be able to get into that as you need to. So you'll have this information so you don't have to worry about taking a picture or anything like that. These are just good examples that have been provided in regards of how we are writing adverse effect statements. In the old days, we would just restate there's an adverse effect. This is a new day. State Department does not allow us just to write students has this disability and that has an adverse effect on educational performance. That's not enough. We have to say specifically what it is and how it's happening, how it's impacting. So her deficit in writing affect her ability to produce different types of written products for varied purposes, which is a requirement of the 4th grade curriculum. And if you see that, you're probably going to see a goal in writing. Okay, another one. This is a speech one for I know we have some speech folk on here. Addison's deficits in speech sound production affect her participation in activities that involve phonics, which require her to identify spelling sound correspondence when the words consist of L, S, Z, L blends, and the S blend. In addition, her deficits affect her ability to converse with peers and engage in spontaneous conversation, as she's often asked to repeat herself due to her speech sound errors. So it's that real descriptive of how that disability is impacting that performance that's similar age and that's expected. And that's what really defines the student has an adverse effect, the student needs special design instruction. These are the things that make them eligible. It's not enough just to say, yeah, we filled out an eligibility form and they have a disability. And we know that impacts their educational performance. We cannot do that. We have to do more. We have to tell how. Because if you look in the guidance document and you look in the law, one of the main things that we do in present level, besides baseline, is we determine what the adverse effect is and how that adverse effect is impacting their performance. Very, very key. Social skills. Amanda's lack of social interaction skills and her ability to recognize the inappropriateness of her verbalizations will adversely affect her ability to self-advocate and to participate appropriately in a real-world group activity with her peers. I can add another one to this. You've all had students that do not understand proximity, and they get up in your space. And so those types of things, that's what we'd be talking about. How their disability and how their deficits are impacting their performance to a degree that they're not going to be able to do what they need to do to function at a level that they need to function. That's why they need an IEP. Okay, so we're going to try this. We're going to go back to the breakout rooms. We're going to access Robert, the sample IEP, okay? And this is going to take us up to the noon hour. We're going to give you plenty of time on this. So I tell you what, let's do. Let's take about a 5-minute break here to gather ourselves. We'll come back. I'll have you placed in breakout rooms. You'll be trying to access and find that sample IEP and complete the activity on the next slide. Now I'm going to put the activity on the next slide. I'm going to put it up there for a second. So we're going to go into breakout rooms, and you're going to be choosing one of these. Okay, we had 22 breakout rooms with 3 or 4 people in them. Okay, we have 90 participants. You do the math. So it's some of them are big. Some of them are. We have a large number of breakout rooms. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow you to choose one of these to work on, and we're going to have you then identify the baseline information in the present level. We're going to have you looking through that present level on the sample Robert IEP. He's a mild mental disability student. We're going to have you access that information, and we want you to come up with in communication, academic performance, social, emotional, or cognitive. One of those 4, your group will choose one of those 4, okay? And then you will go in and you will identify those 5 areas: the strengths, the needs, the baseline, the adverse effect, and the supporting test scores, okay? So come up with, from those present level, that information. And you'll put that, and then you choose your leader, and then your leader's going to answer back in the chat to me privately what your answers are in those breakout sessions. So this will be our last activity for you folks that are only taking the morning session. If you're doing all day, we'll be back on the same Zoom link after this. So we're going to take about a 5 to 7 minute break here. We'll come back at 11:30. You'll be in your breakout rooms. You'll do this activity. We'll leave you in those breakout rooms for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll come back together and look at some information around present level. And we want you to identify in those areas those 5 components that are required. And if you can't find it, you can't find it. But just go through that process, discuss it, talk about what you think it is. Some of you do communication, some of you do academic performance, some of you do cognitive, some of you do social emotional. I'll go ahead and send you to the breakout rooms, and then we'll close those breakout rooms at about 11:45 to 11:50, taking us up to the lunch break. And then if you're coming back with us, we'll be back on the same Zoom link in the afternoon, and we'll go on with measurable annual goals. All right. We may be able to do some measurable annual goals right at the end of this activity as well. So, but we want you to work on this activity, and we want this to be the centerpiece of what you're doing, really working on getting present levels and finding that information. So I'm going to stop sharing right now and put you in the break. want to get on this information about measurable annual goals and what's included in measurable annual goals. And this activity here, this is the information that you'll find in the guidance document itself. So these 2 pages here, this page here and this page here in the guidance document itself, which is on, it's on page, oh goodness, I've lost the page number. Starts on page 40. And there's lots of information in here that says what measurable goals are and what measurable goals are not. And so I want to go through this exercise with you, but we run out of time. I had this plan to do what they are and what they are not. So what I'm going to do in the absence of time is I'm going to go ahead and give you the answers here. And I want you just to kind of take a second and look at this. This is a very important part right here. Measurable annual goals are anticipated results in 1 year. They are specified skills. They are to promote access, to promote learning of skills, to advance mastery, to write appropriately ambitious goals. They're related to the disability, linked to present levels. They're written in order to bridge the gap between where the student is currently functioning and where we expect them to be on grade level. And then the skills and strategies, and it can pass the stranger test. So in other words, if you can pass this IEP along to another district, they can pick it up and just go ahead and implement it without too much problem. What they are not, and this might be even more important, they are not copied and pasted standards. They're not intended to reflect the entire curriculum, and they are not intended to combine a bunch of multiple skills in one goal. So that's what that session is. If you look back over that information, starting on page 40, this information right here is really, really important in understanding what it is to provide an ambitious IEP, one that's unique to the student and their circumstances, and one that's going to provide faith, that's going to be appropriately ambitious, and is going to provide them with a bridge to gap that divide that is between where they are functionally and where they should be academically, and also where they should be in similar grade performance. All right, so we're going to move on from that. So I gave you the answers there. So here are the steps to writing measurable annual goals. Identify the student's baseline for areas of need, priority, powerful impact. Identify skill areas needed to improve to access and progress in the general curriculum. So that's a twofold charge. You're going to work on deficient skills, but you're also going to give some work on grade level, and you're going to provide tools through supplementary aids and services that are going to allow the student to access the general curriculum. You're going to look at what behavior is most modifiable, which one's going to have the most impact, and you're going to look at parent and student interest and get parent input, and then you're going to write measurable annual goals to address prioritized skill areas to include the following. In the goal, you're going to have these 6 components: audience, behavior, circumstance, degree, criterion, evaluation, method of measurement, and frequency of data collection. This is a little screenshot straight out of the guidance document. And you can see it kind of gives you a little bit of a definition that goes along with student's name, what behavior they're going to do, what measurable skill are we going to look at, what's going to stimulate that behavior, the circumstance, how consistently they're going to perform it, what tool are we going to use to measure the goal, and how frequently are we going to take data. So that's a way we're to write a goal in the state of Kentucky. Audience, behavior, circumstance, degree, evaluation, frequency. Now, given these circumstances, the student that's the C part. Given these circumstances, the student will perform this behavior to this degree as measured by this frequency and method of measurement. So what they said here is when given 20 content-related vocabulary words, Mary will orally define 18 of 20 words correctly for 4 consecutive probes as measured by a weekly frequency count. So you see this is a direct measure. You'd be watching the student do that and you'd put a frequency count in there. You could also put probes in here as a curriculum-based measure if you wanted to do it that way. But a frequency count certainly would get it. But that's kind of an example of how to write a goal. Here is a screen that has this information. It has kind of a graphic organizer for you to be able to place a goal. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to pull up one of the 6 goals that are included on the Robert IEP. I'm holding it up here on the screen. Okay. I want you to find one of those goals, and then in the chat box, I want you to put A, B, C, D, E, F. I want you to, in the chat box, I want you to identify the student's name. We all know that's going to be Robert, so that's going to give you only 5 things to do. You're going to identify the behavior on the first goal. The first goal is on page 6 of that IEP, and it says, given situations that require critical thinking skills, and when asked a question, Robert will give a correct response, demonstrating understanding of figurative and complex language in 8 of 10 opportunities over 3 consecutive sessions. So what I want you to do is I want you to take either that goal or one of the other 5 goals that's included in this sample document. And remember, there's no perfect IEP, so you may find one that has some problems with it. You may find one that doesn't fit. I'm not sure that all these goals are exactly correct. So what I want you to do then is I want you to put in the chat, I want you to choose one of those goals, and I want you to put it in the chat really quickly, what the behavior is, what the circumstance, what the degree, criteria, the evaluation, and the frequency all are. Now, if you're having trouble accessing Robert, here are some more goals. Take one of these 3 goals and place that in the graphic organizer. Now, you don't have to type all this information up here. You just put B, C, D, E, F, and tell me what the B is, tell me what the C is, tell me what the D is, the E, and the F. And if you're doing one that's different from Robert, put the name in there. If you're doing one on that screen, I'm going to go back to that screen and leave it now. So does everybody have their information? They know what they're supposed to be doing. And we didn't get to spend as much time as I would have liked on these goals. Second half of the day, we're going to look at methods of measurement, and we're going to look at making sure that the tool we choose will in fact measure the verb that is in the, or the action that's in the body of the goal. So it's very important that you understand, and I'll tell you, if you're not coming back, I'll go ahead and tell you this. In your Google Classroom, under Progress Monitoring, or under Methods of Measurement, there is a website. It's South Bend Community School Corporation. It does a very nice job of explaining to you what those tools are. You have to understand what the tools are and what the tools measure before you can ever hope to write a measurable goal and be able to do the progress monitoring the correct way.